Okay, I guess we're gonna go ahead and get into this. So the reason that I'm doing this video, I had a lot of people, actually from the time that I left to go over to Southeast Asia with questions that are, just hey, why are you doing this? What's going on? And I just thought I would just jump on and answer some of those questions, hopefully, and then if there's any other questions along the way, like I said, get those in the comments, and I'll address those as we go along. So the biggest I guess the biggest question is, okay, hey, why'd you do this? So I booked a vacation to Singapore. Actually, booked the trip in March of last year. I was to visit some coworkers of mine that lived there. They had invited me to visit a couple times, and it didn't work out for one reason or another. And I finally booked the trip last March, and that was supposed to be a 1 week vacation over to Singapore. And as it got closer to the trip, I had kind of I talked to a friend of mine that at the time lived in the Philippines, and he said, "Hey, you're coming over to Singapore? Come visit me in Manila." And I've also got a work trip in Australia, so we can kind of make a little journey of it. So putting that together with me actually wanting to see a little bit more of that part of the country, I just kind of decided it was kind of a perfect set of scenario to check out Southeast Asia. I was able to share some expenses along the way and actually have some reduced or little expenses along the way too. So it's just a good set of circumstances to take an opportunity to see another part of the world. Um, I've enjoyed traveling. I've taken a trip once a year to a new country and to see a couple new states since 2017. So I was already traveling and just really, really like to go and see new places, learn about new people. And a lot of people, they'll wait until, retirement. Say, when I retire, I'm going to take this trip and go and do this. And, as we kind of see right now, like, nothing's guaranteed in life. So to wait to retirement, so hopefully you get there, but you may not. If you make it to retirement, you may not have the health or strength to go around and explore 10 different countries. So those things together as kind of, hey, let's take a shot and go and see some new places around the country or around the world. And one of the first questions that I was asked when I started talking about, taking this trip, leaving a great job to go and do this, I had actually two phone calls and say, "Calvin, are you dying?" And I guess on one hand, I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine. Nothing is wrong. I actually did go and get a full physical just to make sure nothing was wrong. Leaving and being on the other side of the world and having health issues probably would not have been a good idea. So I did go and get a full checkup just to make sure. But yeah, nothing is wrong. As I just wanted to take a leap and do something different in life. And like I said, if there's questions that you have along the way, just feel free to put those in the comment button. Also, if you are enjoying the video, hit the thumbs up button. That will help other people to find that if they are looking for something to watch. And if you're subscribed to the channel, that will help when I release new videos, which is every week currently, new videos released on Tuesdays. Appreciate it. And so the next question that I was probably asked the most, a lot of people say, "Hey, well, Calvin, how long did it take you to save the, 50 or $60,000 that it would actually take to travel for 3 or 4 months?" And it's I was surprised, I guess, that I got that question so much because it really does not cost anywhere near that. I did a little bit of just math on airfare and lodging, and I came in all in for airline tickets and lodging under $7,500. And I didn't include food because wherever you are, you have to pay for food, whether you're at home or on in another country. Um, I will say that when you are overseas or in a place that is kind of heavily touristed, you will probably come out better with your money as if you eat, local food, local restaurants, and food that's familiar with the country. There were a couple places where I ate at familiar foods or from familiar names, and when you do that, you actually probably pay more than you would pay here. So if you are eating local cuisine, I think you'll do fine and actually probably better on your budget. There were some places where I would get great tasty meals for under $3, and in some cases under $2. So um, under $7,500 total with airfare and lodging. And I'll break that down in a little bit because there were some things that made that a little bit easier along the way. And in some places, I actually probably spent more than I could have. Just a matter of either splurging or circumstances that were kind of out of my control. So I've got a question from Kim. Thanks for joining. What was my favorite place? That is a hard question. I didn't dislike any place, and every place was different. So to say that one place was a favorite to me is to say that another place wasn't good. So there were different things about every place. So Singapore, you kind of reminded me of a small Las Vegas. You have some excellent architecture around the Marina Bay. Indonesia, you had a lot of UNESCO heritage spots, the rice fields there, and some of the temples that are around the country. Malaysia, that was the first primarily Muslim country that I was in, so it's kind of interesting to see that culture and actually to kind of see that there wasn't a whole lot of difference other than there was a national religion, but the country was beautiful. Thailand, the north and the south was different. A lot of beaches, and I actually went snorkeling for the first time in Phuket, which is the south of the country, and in the north of the country, Bangkok. It primarily looked like New York City. There's millions, tens of millions of people in Bangkok. So that was something that was surprising for me to see. Australia is a beautiful country. Unfortunately, when I was there, Sydney was affected by the wildfires a little bit, so I didn't get the full taste of Sydney that I probably would have with better skies. I was actually pretty much grounded for a couple of days with the smog being so bad that it just really wasn't a good idea to be outside. New Zealand is very, very beautiful. And if I were forced to actually make a choice of a favorite place, that would probably be a finalist. I know that that's a place that I do definitely want to go back to. The country has so much to offer, and I only got to visit the North Island. So I definitely do want to get back to New Zealand. The Philippines, I've actually been there once before. I have a friend that I've known since middle school that was working there for a few years. So I went there for my 47th birthday, and then I went on this trip as well. Lots to see there, lots of history tied to Spain and the United States. Thailand, Vietnam, lots of history there. I was actually very surprised not to see some of the things I was expecting. I was expecting to learn about the Vietnam War, but really from the American side and things that affected, American POWs. But I also learned a lot of different things that led up to that we're not taught in history books here. But there's, events that went back 100 years in time that kind of set the stage for, the involvement that the United States had in the 60s and 70s. Cambodia, lots of temples. I spent actually the most time in Cambodia, and there were, like I said, Siem Reap, very, very beautiful, lots of history, structures that were built 1,000 years ago. So just walking in the middle of that was just amazing to see, because you think back just here. I mean, there's a lot of places when we think old in the United States, we're thinking 100, 200 years. So to walk in the middle of places, that were built 1,000 years ago which is really truly amazing. Um, and then Taiwan, I was only there for a couple of days and was actually affected by the weather. But seeing towns that were built on the side of a mountain, that was just really, really beautiful to see. And my last stop before coming home was in Tokyo, which I've been there before as well. But it was an opportunity to catch up with friends and see a couple of other sites that I haven't been to, making it outside of Tokyo, taking my first bullet train ride out to Kyoto. So I know that was a long answer, Kim, but I hope that that kind of answers some of it. David asked, of all the places, is there one that I would recommend over others for people who need to narrow their travel plans to a city or country? That would probably depend on like individual tastes. Like if you don't mind roughing it a little bit, I think that would factor in. If you are maybe trying to stay, if you're maybe trying to stay in a scenario that's more comfortable, and I'm answering this based on Southeast Asia because I know that you've mentioned that as a region that you wanted to visit, but I would say Singapore would be a good starting place because it's a different country, but there's a lot of things that you're going to be familiar with. There are differences like driving on the opposite side of the road, different food cultures and things like that. So that would probably be a good place to start. It's where I started because I knew people, but if I look back on my trip, it was kind of a good way to ease into the region. And another question: what was my favorite restaurant or dish? Um, my favorite dish, I'm gonna have to say it was in Auckland, but there was a Chinese restaurant, and I do not recall the name right now, but I do know that I mentioned it in my Auckland blog. But there was a restaurant that stayed open till 3 in the morning, and they served these huge, huge, huge plates of chicken fried rice with whatever you wanted in them. And I know I ate there, I want to say 4 times in a 6-day period. So that was probably my favorite dish, which it's simple and everybody's heard of fried rice, but it was just really, it was, I can't describe how good this actually was. I mean, one dish would get you through a whole day if forgot to eat, which I actually tend to do a lot when I'm out exploring, but one dish of that fried rice will get you through the day. And another question: did I do any underwater photography while snorkeling? I did take a GoPro. I did not have anything to secure to my wrist, so it was in my hand. So it probably wasn't the best video, but I do have a little bit of underwater footage. I'm not the best snorkeler either, so I wasn't underwater for very long at one time. If you check out my YouTube video that covers Phuket, there's a little bit of footage from my snorkeling attempt. And I did not see any sea turtles. Okay, this is a question about Taiwan. Did I try the stinky tofu? I I think I was offered that. I did not try it. I did not try it. Probably just some food in general, as far as like uncommon foods. Um, The weirdest dish that I had on this trip was in Ho Chi Minh City in the south of Vietnam. I actually have a friend that I went to high school with that lived there, so I entrusted him with my food choices for that time. I did tell him that I was putting our friendship on the line by entrusting him with that because I am a picky eater. But I had a dish that I was told that it was squid teeth, and it looked like teeth in this soupy type of dish. Um, I will probably never have it again, but it was not as traumatizing as I thought that it would have been. It actually kind of tasted like a macaroni dish that was maybe not quite cooked as you would want to have it here. But again, it wasn't macaroni. So there was a question about durian. I did not have durian, but I did seek out durian in Singapore. It was out of season, or the markets that we visited did not have it. This was in early November, so I did not have durian. I did have, there's a fruit that looks like it, and I cannot remember the name of it right now. I know I had dragon fruit. Um, I cannot think of the name. It looks like durian, but I did have that, and that actually was not very bad at all. Jackfruit, that was it. Yes, jackfruit was what I had, and I did enjoy that. So I had that as the fruit itself, and then I had some juices with jackfruit as well. And so another question that I was asked is, how did I actually choose the destinations that I went to? Um, there were different reasons for some of the places along the trip. So Singapore, I knew people, so that was why I started there. I knew people. It was kind of a good place to get comfortable, get my feet wet from being away for so long. Other countries were history. There's a lot of history that I wanted to see in Vietnam. Lots of history. I'm a big World War II buff. I got that from my mom. So if there were things tied to the war, I wanted to see that, which I saw in Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand. Australia, that was, again, I had a friend that was working there. I had friends that I met a couple years ago in Las Vegas that told me if I ever got close to New Zealand that I had to drop by, and I'm very, very glad that I did that. They were very welcoming. Um, I had friends from school that lived in the Philippines and Vietnam, and the rest of the countries, they just, they were, nearby, and different things to see in each of those. Cambodia has some interesting history, which I'll, dive into a little bit more here in the next couple of weeks. So those are like different reasons there. So either friends or specific that I wanted to see in those countries. Another question. Did I try the Singapore dumplings? Um, I did have dumplings, and I forgot, I have another high school friend in Singapore, and she took me to my first serving of dumplings, and I cannot think of the name of the restaurant right now. I know the initials are like DTF, but I forgot what that stands for right now. And they also have what are like, they're called hawker markets, but they're kind of food courts, and they have like handmade dumplings through there. And so I got introduced to dumplings there, and I've been eating them ever since. And that was actually one of the first dinners that I had when I made it back to the States, was dumplings. Unusual animals. I don't know if they're unusual, but I did see there's a lot of monkeys in Malaysia, in Thailand, and where else did I see monkeys? Thailand, none in New Zealand that I saw. Three or four countries, there's monkeys in a lot of different places, just kind of running around. And they are really curious. If you've got something that interests them, they're going to come and check it out. If you have food out and they get their hands on it, they're going to get it. They're going to run away with it. I don't know if anybody saw, there was a viral video a couple weeks ago with some, I don't know what part of Thailand it was, but there were just like a bunch of monkeys pretty much blocking traffic because they were, I guess, riding over food. They get really, really used to getting food from people, and obviously people aren't traveling and they're not out right now. So they said that that's what the I guess monkey riot, for lack of a better term, was kind of going on there. They were kind of fighting over a little bit of food that they were able to get their hands on. because somebody did see the monkeys. Let's see. So there was a question earlier that as far as like how much exploring did I do each day? It kind of varied. When I first started out, it was kind of, okay, I wake up and I've got to see, from sun up to sundown, have to see as much as possible, and just kind of cramming everything in. And I learned pretty quick, about 4 or 5 weeks in, that wasn't the best way to go about things. So I would pick out something, like if I had a scheduled tour, that might be a half day tour. If I had I wouldn't do a whole lot after a tour. There were a couple of full day tours, and for full day tours, they can be a beating. I would just make sure, like, if you ever do a full day tour, just make sure that it is something that you're really truly interested in. It still makes it worth it. But if it's kind of a toss up on whether you want to go and do it or not, just really take some time to consider before you do a full day tour, because some of those tours, I know one tour I actually had to wake up at 4 in the morning to make it to, and then it was like an all day deal. So I'm glad that I took the tour. I would do it again. Just something that you have to be aware of when you do that. So I had a couple of just general questions about Japan. One of those was, what was the weather like? This was mid-February, so it was actually very cold in Japan. It was in the 30s and low 40s during the time that I was there. So this was the second week of February that I was in Japan. And then some other questions that I have were must see things to do in Japan. I would say the temples or shrines. Temples are Buddhist, religious, Buddhist, and then shrines are Shinto religion. So there are lots of Buddhist structures and Shinto structures in Japan. And in some cases, you might actually have both in the same place. So I would check out at least one temple, but there's lots to choose from, big and small. Shibuya Crossing, you've probably seen this on TV, even if you didn't know what it is. It's the big scramble crossing. And what makes it unique, there's a big train station, and it's a big commerce and commerce section. And there's like streets that come in from 5 different areas. And a lot of times here, you can see crosswalk, you cross one way and then everybody crosses the other way. This crossing is just everybody, like every direction stops, and then everybody just kind of gets out and crosses the street at one time. And it's kind of pretty hectic, but cool thing to check out. I know when I was there, I kind of darted through a couple of different times just to go and see it and just kind of be in the middle of it. So Shibuya Crossing is something that you should check out. The other thing is Akihabara district in Tokyo. It is a kind of it's kind of difficult to describe, but if you are a gamer or electronics fan, you definitely want to go there. It's just the whole district is just all, like I said, it's kind of electronics shopping. There are multi-story arcades there, and then you also kind of see some of the I'll say unique outfits. You'll see people, kind of dressed up like cosplayers, and it's just kind of almost like a circus in some areas. So I would check out the Akihabara district in Tokyo. Okay, David has a question. Did anything stand out that I wish I had known beforehand or planned for differently? That's a good question. And there's probably a couple different things. So, as far as things that I wish I had done differently, um, packing. I thought I was traveling light. I had a 30-liter spray backpack that was, all of my clothes and personal items. And then I had a camera bag, and I thought I packed light. I probably could have taken half of the clothes that I did. I had probably a dozen shirts, one pair of jeans, actually, no, two pairs of jeans, a pair of pants, um, a half a dozen pairs of shorts, and plenty of underwear. But a lot of the reasons that I took so many clothes, I was not sure, when I was going to have access to a laundry. Some of the time I spent in hostels, so I wasn't sure, what that situation was going to be like. But it turned out that I was able to do laundry every week, but I just didn't know that that was going to happen. And even with that, I just kind of found that there were some shirts that I liked a lot better, and I just found myself wearing those. So what I will say is, if you're going to some place that, particularly if it's a warm weather climate, merino wool, that is a savior in a lot of different ways. It's thin, and it does not doesn't hold moisture. It wicks away, and it does not hold odor. So definitely check that out. I had three or four merino wool T-shirts that I had during my trip, and if you look back through the pictures and videos, that's primarily what I'm wearing. I did buy a couple T-shirts along the way, and that was something else that I didn't factor in, is that if you get someplace and you find that you need something, you can buy it. I was a little bit nervous about that, just because I'm a little bit bigger and was kind of concerned about, being able to find things in my size. But the couple times that I did have to go shopping, I was able to do it. I actually found that I needed a coat when I got to Taiwan. I just didn't plan for the weather there, and there was no way I was walking around in a T-shirt with the temperature in the 30s and 40s there. Um, the other things, like planning differently. The other thing that I would have done is I would have traveled slower. I went through 12 countries in 15 weeks, which I'm glad that I saw those countries. I got a decent taste for those countries, but if I had to do differently, I would go to fewer countries and stay for a longer period of time. So I already know if I go back to New Zealand, I want to stay for 3 or 4 weeks, and that reduces airfare costs, because you're not jumping from country to country, and it gives you more of an opportunity to kind of take in the culture, maybe some things that you see that might look odd. You may have some time to actually figure out the context behind some of those things. So those are the two things that I can think of off the top of my head that I would do differently. I actually also, if I were making long jumps between countries, I might do a little bit more advanced planning. I didn't buy airfare for much of my flights until maybe a couple days before. And in some cases, that ended up costing me money. And not in a lot of cases, but bigger cases, bigger distances, sometimes would have cost me a little bit more money than it had to. But the flip side there is I had flexibility to either stay somewhere longer or leave by not buying everything, all in advance. So that's kind of, you have to kind of pick your poison on that. And there was another part to that question. Is there anything that I wish that I'd known beforehand? There wasn't anything that really caught me off guard. I'm gonna have to table that, but if I think of something, I will definitely I'll get that back to you directly, David. And there's a comment here about overpacking. A tip that I've heard is to pack what you think that you're going to need, and then take half of it out, leave half of it out, and you'll be okay. A lot of things that you can do, like I packed all the toiletries that I thought that I would need for my trip, and you can find almost every brand that you see in the United States. You can find it in at least larger cities overseas too. So that was something, and actually that is something that I wish I had known beforehand. Is that I didn't have to buy all my toiletries before before I went over there. So it was very, very easy to go to a drugstore or any store and just get whatever I needed. Caught off guard. So from there wasn't anything that I guess from caught off guard that I guess actually I will say in some places in Southeast Asia, like crosswalks or crossing the street, it is as easy as just waiting for a light to change or a signal to change before you cross the street. There are some places that there are no traffic signals at a busy intersection, and if you just sit there and wait for something to happen, you'll be sitting there at that intersection for a long time to cross the street. So it's almost like, I know I'm probably about to age myself here, but if people are familiar with the game of Frogger, that is what crossing the street is like. Sometimes you just kind of have to get out there and trust that you're not going to get run over. And for what it's worth, the people, this is usually in areas where motorbikes or scooters are the main mode of transportation. They're good at dodging people. You just have to kind of get in and walk confidently. You can't, turn around and get out there and hesitate. So that was probably one of the biggest things that it took me a little bit to kind of figure out, hey, how to cross the street. And another question that I've been asked a little bit is, am I done, or what's next? So I did leave my job to take this trip, and part of it was really to kind of see, hey, do I like traveling on a long term basis? Am I going to get out here and say, hey, this stinks, or I'm never going to travel again? And I did not get that at all. I really enjoyed being, in different places and just something new to see every time. So I do intend to do some more traveling. Obviously, current events have affected the timing of some of those things, but my initial plans, really, right now, I would have been in Louisiana, exploring the eastern side of the country, and then, or of the state of Louisiana, and then New Orleans. There was a travel conference also that I was supposed to be attending in New Orleans at the around the 10th of May. That has been postponed for at least 6 months, but might get pushed back again. So, a little bit of exploring around Texas and Louisiana. I was actually in the works to team up with a touring company to some tours to South America, to Ecuador and Guatemala. That is obviously indefinitely on hold. It's probably going to be next year before that comes up, but I am going to be looking to do a group trip to one or both of those countries. So if that is something that you're interested in, let me know, and I'll definitely be putting more information about that when it makes sense to do so. When it is safe to travel, I'm probably going to. I won't jump just right out of the country again, because I'm expecting that there's going to be probably some restrictions on international travel, and so I don't want to get compromised by maybe changing rules outside of the country. Some places that I do want to see, I do want to visit St. Augustine, and in Florida, there's a lot of history that I want to see there. So I haven't chosen any other destinations, but those are the places that I really want to check out and I plan to check out in the immediate future. Did I find communication easy in most places? And was technology necessary and helpful? Okay, so communication, it was actually much better than I thought. Not everybody speaks English, even in Japan, where you might think that everybody speaks English. So, but places like Japan, Singapore, real easy. Philippines, real easy. Say most people do speak English. Now, you may find in cases like when you have to deal with either taxi drivers, which was kind of surprising to me that maybe a taxi driver didn't know English, but the ways around that usually is, particularly like if you're staying in a hotel, is you can get cards that actually say, in Japanese or Tagalog or whatever the language is wherever you are, and it'll have the language that basically says, take me to this location. And that's very helpful to keep with you. And even if the hotel doesn't have it, just kind of have something that shows in the local language where you're staying, and then if necessary where you're going. That's pretty helpful. But as far as getting someplace, restaurants, most restaurants would have, even if they don't have an English language menu, they'll have pictures so you can kind of see, what is on the menu. Um, and so language is not as big of an issue as you would think that it is. So would it help out maybe if you knew more of the local language? Yes, it would in any case, but you can do most of the things that you need to do without having to know another language. I did use Google Translate in a couple of instances where I would just kind of type out the question that I was trying to get asked, and then they would either if they understood and they could reply in English, they might, or they would just use my phone to reply back to me using Google Translate. I can only remember off the top of my head 3, maybe 4 times that I did that the whole trip. So the question about how did I handle different currency and exchange rates? This is actually pretty funny. So I would always get currency whenever I came to a new country. I would always get cash at the airport before I left. And I've heard different things where, okay, the airport is the best place or it might be the worst place. If you're using ATM, like I would always use an ATM and do a withdrawal if I was first coming into a country. If I had something left over from the country before, then I would exchange that at the currency exchange. And I've heard that sometimes that the rates are not the best in the airport, but I just felt more comfortable taking care of it in the airport than outside of the airport. The different currency, it wasn't a big issue, but some of the exchange rates are kind of weird because so you're spending sometimes thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of a currency. And I know like Vietnam, like you can have it's like a million dong is like $100 or something like that. And so you get used to spending these big amounts, and sometimes you can kind of get hypnotized by that where something there's a big multiple on your dollar and you're thinking, okay, well, it's a lot less in my currency, so you can kind of get hypnotized into thinking that something doesn't cost a lot, but it really does. There's just more zeros on the currency, so you have to be mindful of that so that you don't kind of do that. There was a place in Thailand where I thought that I was spending just a couple dollars for a hamburger, and it ended up being like a $20 lunch. And I was hypnotized into thinking that I wasn't paying that much. So it's easy to happen, but it doesn't have to. Some are easy, just a matter of just taking it off a zero or two, but some you have to kind of think in multiple. So I would just figure out a system for each country that what works. And they even have, I didn't use them, but they even have currency apps where you can type it in and it'll tell you exactly what it is in your country. Cambodia is actually interesting. They actually accept US dollars, and they have ATMs that give you money in US dollars. So you'll actually get on your receipt, it'll tell you, that it's this much in Cambodian currency and it's this much in US dollars. So that was strange. That was something that was unexpected. But it made it a little easier in some cases there. Okay, I don't see any other questions. If you have any, feel free to fire away. I actually didn't realize we've been here for 45 minutes, so happy to keep answering questions if there's any that are out there. If there's not, that's okay too. I'll see how kind of maybe how this is received. So that I might do something like this again. It might be on YouTube. It might be on another platform. This was the easiest one for me right now, but I know that there's some other things like on Facebook and Instagram as well. But this is something that I can at least I know I can save and replay if necessary. Question: were there times that I felt uncomfortable or unsafe? There were definitely just some uncomfortable times, just in it's just a new situation, like, hey, how to figure this out. I actually walked in Thailand. There was a museum that I was trying to see an exhibit in a museum, and I didn't realize that the museum was actually closed. So the gate was open, and I walked in, but they were remodeling, and the security guard did not know. He didn't know English, and he was telling me I couldn't come in. And I didn't understand what he was saying, so that was actually one of the Google Translate situations. But yeah, that was an awkward situation, but it's not an unsafe situation. Um, I did have another. It was a debacle, but kind of my own making when I was trying to check into one of my Airbnbs in Bangkok. This was at night, and I'd gotten detailed instructions from the host on how to find the key to get into the apartment. He provided two different sets of instructions, and one wasn't as detailed as the other one, and I missed the more detailed one. So I ended up walking back and forth down the street for probably a half an hour, with my luggage, and people, hey, there goes that guy again. And so I was personally uncomfortable, thinking, okay, this is kind of awkward, me walking up and down the street, and it's obvious that I'm lost, and maybe something might happen. But as I got to hang out in the city for longer, it wasn't a unsafe situation. I didn't feel unsafe really anywhere. So the actually, I'll step back from that a little bit. In Cambodia, I noticed that there were, and I probably had seen this a little bit earlier too, but you will not see. I didn't see a lot of leashes on animals. So when I was walking down a street in Siem Reap, Cambodia, at night, and saw a dog out there, and I kind of hesitated for a second because the dog, no owner, and no leash, but it I guess they're either used to people, and like I said, it wasn't anything there. But yeah, so seeing that there, it kind of startled me for a little bit. But it's just something to get used to. And I think as long as you don't walk around someplace and kind of look like that you look like you're scared, I guess that you're probably going to be okay. The only thing I would probably say is maybe in some cases you might want to watch for your belongings. I didn't feel any scenario where I thought that I was at risk for being robbed or anything like that. I had heard some stories about the capital of Cambodia, Phnom Penh, but I didn't experience anything at all. I have a friend that was actually she was robbed by somebody. We don't know if it was a real or fake. They don't have Uber in Asia. It's called Grab in most places in the country. And she was robbed by a scooter driver that tricked her into getting on the bike, put her stuff in the storage spaces underneath the seat, and then he did something, and she got off the bike, and then he drove off with her stuff. So like something can happen anywhere. Like you can get robbed, or something unsafe can happen here, but it's just a matter of just being smart. And if something doesn't look right, go the other way, or take a different course of action. Some good questions tonight. I really appreciate some of this. I've actually had to think about this, so it's been pretty good. It helps me to actually remember my trip too. And I know, like I said, I talked about it briefly at the beginning. Like the people that asked me about, costs. Hey, did this cost, tens of thousands of dollars? I actually, before I hopped on, I actually just went back through just to see, kind of what I did spend and kind of what that went to. So um, I'm going to call this all in, but it's not factoring everything. But this is my airfare and lodging. The total for the two for 15 weeks of travel came in under $7,500. So that's something I think if somebody is determined to take a trip. I mean, it take a little while to save up for it, but it's not this unachievable goal to save for airfare and travel. This could have been lower in some cases. I chose to splurge in some cases, and then there were some places that I was fortunate and had some reduced costs by staying with friends in Australia and New Zealand and in the Philippines. But and that was kind of split half and half. So 3,700 on airfare and 3,600 in lodging. Um, November, the like the biggest portion of your airfare, particularly if you're talking about the United States to Southeast Asia, is really getting there and getting back. So I got airfare. I purchased months in advance from Dallas to Singapore. That was my most expensive flight at $1,000. And then most of my flights, once I got inside of Southeast Asia, I did two different things. I flew the local version of, I want to say the local version of Spirit Airlines, which is Air Asia. And they have really, really cheap airfare. I was getting flights between $75 and $100. And there's a lot of things where, call it bare bones as far as travel goes. But as long as okay, hey, here's a ticket price, and there, you can either purchase, your luggage check-in at the time that you book, which I really highly recommend. It costs you more if you do it at the time of check-in, but like I said, flights were right at $100 inside. Going from countries between Southeast Asia were right around $100. The only exception to that is one of my flights going from Phuket to Bangkok. I wasn't sure when I was going to leave, and I actually ended up buying my flight 12 hours before I left. And that flight was a couple $100 for that, just because I pretty much bought it the night before. But everything, if I bought it, even as little as 2 or 3 days, real affordable to get around within the countries of Southeast Asia. Getting from Thailand over to Australia, that was a little more challenging. Although I use my airline miles to get from Thailand to Australia, and actually for what would have been a domestic flight redemption here to maybe go from Texas to Seattle on an economy flight, I actually got a business class, one of those lie flat seats with the lay down bed and everything like that, for about the same amount of miles that it would have taken to do a domestic flight. So really affordable, once you get outside of the country using your miles. And I was only able to do that going from or going to Australia. Going back, the timing was a little weird because that was leading up to the week of Christmas, going into the Philippines. Christmas is really big holiday there, so it was challenging to get a miles flight, and the flight was one of my second most expensive flight, getting back to the Philippines from actually New Zealand. So that was a really challenging flight. I actually remember when I booked that flight. I booked that one over the phone with an agent, and the agent, he had to double check because he thought he had made a mistake because of the rate. So that was like an $800 flight, but it's normally not that expensive. It's just the time that I was buying it for the time that I was buying it during the holidays. But yeah, taking advantage of miles can really help to reduce your airfare. And If I get enough of questions about that, I actually might kind of dive a little bit more into how to take advantage of that. Because you get a lot of people think, okay, I can only get miles, when I actually take an airline flight. But there's times that you can, like I'm restocking my miles right now. I haven't been on a flight since February, but I'm restocking miles just by doing certain things and purchasing things that I would already purchase in certain methods to continue to gain miles towards future trips. And also hotel points help to reduce costs on lodging. And if you kind of break out, and for some people this might be breaking out of your comfort zone, but doing things like hostels can really cut down costs. So I stayed in some 4-bedroom, 6-bedroom, and I stayed in one 12-bedroom dorm in a couple countries. And some of those, for 6, 7, 8 days, it doesn't really cost a whole lot. So I think the highest dorm cost that I paid, or hostel cost, was $25 a night in Singapore, and the cheapest rate that I paid in Cambodia was $7 a night. So I stayed in Siem Reap in a dorm for 11 nights, and with my room. And then they also had a restaurant and a bar in there, which I put that on my tab. The total for that 11 days was $112.75. So if you don't get too too fancy with things, and I did a couple times. I actually splurged on hotel just to kind of take a break from being around people, because I was gone for 15 weeks, and a lot of that was I was traveling solo for most of that time, but you're out and about. So a couple times I splurged and just kind of got a higher end hotel. But most of the time I either did Airbnbs for, $15 or $20, $25 a night, dorms for, as low as $7, and I'd say high is like about $25 a night that you can stay in. And even most hotels, you can get decent hotels for right around $100 a night. Japan is a little bit different. That's probably about the bottom basement pricing in Japan, but most places you can get good rates. But the way I look at it is that if I'm doing my trip right, I'm not in the hotel for a lot of the time, and opening up to things like dorms can help you to meet people. Like I was in Cambodia again for 11 days in Siem Reap by myself, but being with the people in the dorms, I've got friends that I actually still keep in touch with, whether on Facebook or Instagram, and it will probably play a factor into my future trips, visiting them in their hometowns. So, okay, we've had a good hour here. I really appreciate all the questions. I'm gonna, I guess, close it up for the day. But if there's any other questions, feel free to reach out directly to me. However, that you know how to get in touch with me. If you have my number, call me or catch me on my social channels. I will have another YouTube video out on Tuesday for the second part of my visit to the Philippines. If you're a fan of World War II, you'll really like that one. It kind of ties into the history of General MacArthur as it pertains to the Philippines. So I really appreciate everybody's time, and I hope that you got something out of this. Appreciate you hitting the thumbs up if you did get something out of it, and I will catch you in the next place that we meet, online or in person. Take care.